Hi everybody, I'm Laurel. I'm a second year. My home school is McCormick. I'm an environmental engineering major, but I also have a double major in anthropology with a concentration in archaeology, and specifically my research interests when I'm not at work are usually contamination and historical archaeology. But right now I'm here actually as a student employee because I am a student associate at the Block Museum of Art. And so I'm one of a cohort of about 18 student employees. And I'm here today to tell you a little bit about what we do, our current exhibits, and how we've thought about teaching with water and interdisciplinary studies. So first, what's the Block? Just to set the scene, we're going to go, what is the Block Museum? What is my role, the student associate? Why am I talking to you about water when I could be talking to you about art, about anything beyond this being any water? And then we're going to do a little version of a close looking exercise, which is a teaching exercise that we commonly go through with undergraduates and like groups of all ages. It's what student associates use on tours, and it's just sort of intended to be an approachable way to looking at art for people who might not be used to looking at art, or like feeling like they have something to say about it, or just not knowing how to approach it. So to start, the Block is Northwestern's academic art museum, which means we are here to support Northwestern's academics. And you might be familiar with somewhere like the Art Institute, where they have a little bit of everything from everywhere, and they try to have a really broad collection. We are a smaller museum. We don't actually have any permanent exhibits, so all of our galleries rotate, and we're sort of narrower but deeper. So we mainly focus on works on paper, because we have limited storage space, and that's also how our collection started out in the 60s. And we try to find things that really align with like areas that Northwestern's teaching in. So like we have a lot of African contemporary and modern art in order to pair really well with the Herskovits Library's collections. Like we have really strong like indigenous art collection, and and it gets bigger every year, and that's really aligning with like Center for Native American Research and all of their interests in teaching. But we are free, open to all, open noon to 8, Wednesday through Friday, and then noon to 5 on weekends. And beyond just serving Northwestern, we are also here for the Evanston community and also the broader Chicago community. We have artists from all over the city, all over the country come and show their work, do talks. And so we have connections to a lot of places. And connection is sort of the watchword for what we want to do, is bringing a diverse set of perspectives that can both enhance Northwestern's academics, strengthen ties to the community, all of that. So what do I actually do? So these are two of my lovely coworkers, Alexa and Aranza, and we are the student associate team. So there's a cohort of 18 of us, and we are sort of hybrid advisors to the curatorial staff and also ambassadors to the student community. So our job is to lead and design programming, like advise curatorial on like how students most want to engage with the museum, like what we feel is lacking, and we also are here to promote the museum to the academic community. That's kind of what I'm doing now. So one of our main duties is what we call an art talk, which is a longer version of the exercise I'm going to lead you through later. And it's essentially an hour-long session with 2 BMSAs. Our abbreviation is BMSA, so if I use that, don't get confused. 2 of us leading a discussion on one of our current exhibits, sort of just structured like halfway between like a tour and discussion session. And so we're not like, it's not structured like I tell you facts about a piece of art and then we move on, like you might get a museum tour. Instead, we're trying to get people to look closely and tell us what they see, and then we can build on that towards a collective interpretation of a piece of art. So it's much more like a TA leading a discussion section or something like that, rather than I'm telling you things, now let's move on to the next piece. And the other thing we do is once a year, we as student associates get together over the course of 2 terms, and we decide on a new work of art to buy. And so this is sort of like a microcosm of all of the considerations the museum puts into collecting. So deciding how will this support teaching? How close is it to the other things we have in our collection? How does it synergize or pair or offer different perspectives to work we already have? And so this is like an introduction to museum ethics and duties of care, and also writing materials and because we have to do object descriptions of the piece we eventually acquire, labels, and other materials for publication. And so there's a lot of, we first narrow down a list of artists, narrow that list of artists down even further, select an artist to buy from, and then spend several more weeks debating what piece to buy. Sarah. Do you have a budget? Depends on the year. This year we are about $15,000 of donor money, and a lot of our funding comes from donors. And if you'd like to hear more about that, my wonderful colleague Isabella can probably talk to you more. I have to call you out. But that, and I should say that the student associates represent all different majors. I'm one of a few engineering majors. We have art history, economics, political science, environmental science. We don't have any prerequisites like previous museum experience. This is intended to be a diverse cohort of students who are all sharing their ideas. So with that, I'm going to go into a little bit of my experience of doing that, specifically relating to water. So if I'm talking about our art process in general, what does this have to do with any water? And in my experience, water as a subject for art is really powerful. When it came up in discussing what our criteria were for acquiring a work of art, my other BMSAs and I, there were a lot of opinions on what a good work of art should do. I'm one of the people that said, I want a good work of art to make me uncomfortable, to make me question something I've held previously, to give me a new experience or a perspective I didn't previously have. And some of my colleagues said that art that is most attractive to them is something familiar, something that feels like it speaks to an experience that is true to them, that is relatable. And at first, these can kind of seem like contradictory opinions. Like, how can something both be familiar and like thought-provoking and uncomfortable? But specifically, works relating to water get at that for me, because there are so many ways to know a body of water, a system, that everybody knows something about it. We engage with water on a daily basis, whether it be through your research, like our presentation last month highlighted, or be it through your daily life. Like, we all use water in some way, and we all have particular conceptions of water. So we all know something, but it's very hard to find somebody who knows everything. And so when you're talking about something, everybody has something to bring with a piece about water, but nobody has a totality. And that's the other piece that we really want art to do at the block, is find things that resist singular interpretation and that can support robust discussion. So that's also where a site of connection comes in, is water is a meeting place between disciplines. Like, that's what the point of any water is. We can all talk about things in different ways, be it water sampling, like metaphor and artistic divisions of water. There are different ways of knowing, and getting at sort of more abstract or emotional angles allows us to bring those disciplines together. I think the artist Teresa Montoya, who's depicted here with our current exhibit Tolizzo, or Yellow Water, is a really good example of that. She's an anthropologist and had a little bit of photojournalistic training as well, but she talks about photography as sort of akin to sampling water, art as capturing a particular moment of a dynamic system. And I think giving people samples and data to work off of to expand like a larger narrative is a really interesting way to look at how we prompt discussion. So with that, I'm going to make you all do discussion. So this is going to be moderate audience participation, but we are going to do a close looking exercise. So I'm going to give you an image from Teresa Montoya's Tolizzo, and first, I just want you to describe what you see. I'm going to give you 30 seconds. Just look. Nobody says anything. We're all just going to take a breath and take things in. And then I'm going to ask people just describe what they see. And this is like kindergarten level, like I want shapes and colors. Like, what strikes your eye first? Is it like, where do you see first? Like, if it seems kind of pointlessly obvious, that's what I'm looking for. Then we're going to take those observations and bring them together to hint at what we think like a larger position or meaning might be. Then I'm going to give you a bit more context for the piece of art, And then we're going to come back and see how that context either confirms our previous analysis or might disrupt it in some ways. And then we come to a larger interpretation. So without that, I'm going to give you 30 seconds to look at this, so just take it in. And as with the museum, you guys are also free to get up and come closer if you would like. I'm not sure how well the projector is reading from the back of the room, but if you want to look at detail or anything like that, just as we would in the gallery, I encourage you to move around if you would want to. Now that we've all had a certain chance to look, can I ask what area of the image strikes your eye first? Yeah, no. This doesn't have to be a hands raised discussion. This can be a shouted out. Like, this is a casual atmosphere. So, why the yellow? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Do you see red anywhere else in the image? Mm-hmm. Anything else that immediately just sort of. Mm-hmm. So we have a big cloud and we have a big yellow sign. Anything else?
That chain link fence, that is what's in focus.
Mm-hmm.
Stuff happening in the background, but we really are confronted with.
Yeah.
Not very well. And then eventually you kind of listen to like their whys like this, and then finally I saw the U.S. Department of Energy sign, and then that kind of just gave a little bit more context. Like, oh, like I wonder like what's going on.
Yeah, so moving in on the other sign, is there anything you notice about like the lettering, like just what they've chosen to emphasize there?
I thought it was funny that there's a sign in words to the animals. Like, animals, do not drink this.
I was going to say, yeah, I can read it out for like people in back if you can't see. So it says, danger, humans and animals must not drink the seawater. And then there is presumably the same message repeated in a different language on the bottom. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of cut off by the bolts, like nobody. So for a little more context, that language is Dene, which is sort of the word that Navajo people use for themselves. So just knowing that that is in Navajo and that this is, where do we think this might be? Is there any clues? Like, can we look at like major features of the landscape that might give us an idea as to where we are? It's flat and scrubby. Like, it looks a bit like a desert, right? Can we also see, I noticed nobody's brought up this yet. So for something to be that big on the horizon, it's got to be pretty big, right? Do we think it looks natural, like human made? Mm-hmm. So we've got some sort of a desert landscape. We've got a mountain in the background. Mm-hmm. So we kind of have this like scrubby vegetation, like generally like deserty looking. And then we've got this big chain link fence, and we've got this bright yellow sign that the artist has chosen to put in focus rather than the background. So for a little more context, this is just right outside Shiprock on the Navajo Reservation. So Shiprock is an extremely secret place to the Dene people, and this is also a previous site of uranium mining. So Shiprock is the formation that you can see in the back here. And this is an exhibit that is generally about the Gold King mine spill, which is a different environmental disaster originating from the Gold King mine just north of Silverton, Colorado, over in a watershed that eventually leads down to the Ananas River and into the Navajo Nation and to Shiprock itself. And so we have an exhibit that's nominally about this one event of contamination, but we're seeing the results of past mining here, which is uranium contamination, not heavy metals like the Gold King mine spill. So what does knowing that make different about this image?
Well, it makes me see, I don't know if it's a contradiction or the same thing, like the lifesavers, it seemed to be something that you would use when you were in the water. And it's the same shape as the like do not drink.
Mm-hmm.
But and they're both trying to preserve life, I guess, but it also suggests that people could be swimming.
Because yeah, right back there, we have a seep pond from a uranium mining site. So that is a body of water, even though it's obscured by vegetation. Is there anything else that's weird knowing that there's this big chain link fence in front of us pot that's pretty important to people?
Makes me wonder why this sign is on Tahoe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so right now in the Navajo Nation, sorry.
What's around the pond looks artificial, from space, so everything else is
Still natural, but we're seeing like in other colors, we've still got like white here. Would we normally associate white with like naturally occurring formations here? Or does that look more like buildings maybe or something like imposed? Mm-hmm. So we've got this kind of built up area, and then we've got a uranium contaminated pond. And all that's really standing between you and the pond is a fence, some life preservers, and a sign.
Is that a second fence there?
I think that's a fence around the other side of the pond. So this is kind of at the corner. Mm-hmm. And also, the sign says animals. Are you aware of any animals that read English? Like, I don't also know many birds that like to obey fences. That's not really their thing. So,
but also the context that you gave before, like there was the upstream gold mine that impacted the downstream. So now you have something much closer, but it seems like it's going to be okay because of this chain fence. So we know that that's not how
mm-hmm.
threats continue.
Yeah. So knowing that.
Artists also thinking like this must be close to where people live because we're addressing animals in English, but probably their dogs
Mm-hmm.
or other pets.
Yeah, really good point. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so with the sign, water is sort of depicted. What would we say this is? Yeah, so it's water's. hmm And yeah, it's water is contained, it stays where you put it, right? Does that necessarily gel with how we understand like water works? Like we have these clouds in the background, and we know that those clouds are water. They are moisture. They evaporate and they will fall back down again. So knowing that there's this like very toxic thing contained in this sort of like kind of mundane way, like you protect it like you would protect like somebody's property. Like this is about the same fencing that they have like at the construction sites down like just south of here on campus that make you feel like emotionally any different than when you first saw the image? Does it seem like more dangerous, more precarious? And the other thing is, what do you think we have a picture of a completely different event of contamination that was pre-existing when the other mine spill happened in an exhibit that's about this mine spill? I want us to think a little bit about what we consider baseline to be, especially in a scientific concept. So, what's normal, what's background, what's expected? And so, if we know we already have this incredibly toxic uranium ore that has been the byproduct of mining in this area, and then it's also getting an inflow of heavy metals, what does it mean for the heavy metals to be gone? Is that water safe now? And that's one of the questions that Teresa Montoya throughout. This is also going to be a promo for the exhibit itself. Is asking throughout Tolitso or Yellow Water is what is like normal amount of contamination in an area that's already historically been contaminated? Like, how do we consider a safe baseline when things have already been disrupted? And like this sort of disruption doesn't look particularly like novel. Like there's not a bunch of people like flashing lights saying like don't drink this. Like there's nobody here. It's just sort of like, we'll put a fence up about it. Don't drink it.
And the name of the exhibit is Yellow Water.
Yes, so it's Dovitso, which is Dene for yellow water.
Right. And this sign is yellow.
Mm-hmm.
Does
Yeah.
the water look yellow when you see it, the contaminated water?
So the water looks yellow from the Golden King mine spill when it is initially discharged. But when it settles down, and you can see this in the water samples that are part of the exhibit, it's sediments. And so it looks normal. I think I might leave us with that of just thinking about what it looks like when we can't necessarily visualize contamination, or when like our scientific baseline might not see what things were like before. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Forgot I did have close-ups. And then I am here on behalf of the block, so I have to do promotion. And so we have a bunch of water-related events coming up. We have a talk with the Dene Photography Collective featuring Teresa Montoya this Saturday. It will be very interesting, I promise. She has a really like interesting approach to photography and like community organizing and documentation. Is also self-promotion. We have an art talk on our other exhibit, The Marin Foods of Janae by Dia Traore, which is given by some of my excellent colleagues on Saturday as well. But then I am also giving an art talk on Sunday. And then finally, I do want to highlight our really excellent Science on Screen series run by our sort of like sister organization at Block Cinema. So they have a grant right now, and they are doing a series of films all about weather, and they're getting professors and scientists from around here to both first introduce the films and then participate in discussion afterwards. So on April 17th, we'll have a film introduced by Shelby Hatch, who's a chemist here, and it promises to be very interesting. There's live cinema performance, and I should say that Block Cinema also has real film cameras. Like we have proper like 35 millimeter, and if you haven't seen like live film projected, it is an interesting experience. And in some cases, it is worth going just for that. And then we also have Florence Days of Destruction, which is covering like the early approaches to like archival consideration in the event of a devastating natural disaster related to water in the 1960s. And then finally, do you know an undergraduate who likes art, who would like to talk about art, who would like to get paid to talk about art? We are open for applications for the 2026-2027 Block Museum Student Associate Cohort. No previous museum experience required, like current first through third years, so who will be like second through fourth years next year are welcome to apply. It is, from my experience, like a very non-intimidating interview process. It's a like very rewarding but not a super high demand job. And if you are an undergraduate yourself, or if you know an undergraduate who would you think would be a good fit, please just tell them to try out. We also have a curatorial internship, which is due on the same day, and everything is on the Block website if you'd like to know more about that. Yeah, I think that's it.